Okay, this is the latest edition of Front Up, and my name's Whitey Willauer, and we have a wonderful guest here, Bill Tramposh from the Nantucket Historical Association.
Right.
And what is your position there? Are you in charge?
Yeah, I'm the executive director.
You're the ED.
Right.
Well, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And then this past weekend, I was off island, but
Right.
I got word all the way down to Newport.
Wow.
About the success of they were asking who won and everything like that. Now tell me a little bit about how that started, because it was so successful.
Right.
What did you do right?
Well, we're still trying to get a pulse on that. I'm starting to call it Woodstock for local historians. We had 279 people.
Wow.
You know, the galleries and the mezzanines were packed. It looked like a scene out of To Kill a Mockingbird, you know, with all of these people looking over the railings down at 13 teams competing. It was.
I thought it was 14. How did I get that?
Well, there was one just about to come in, so I think the final count was 13.
Okay.
So, I mean, what do I know? I was one of the judges, right?
You're not supposed to know that.
I think it was 13. But anyway, we knew it would be popular. We had no idea it would be so popular. And the way it started, at least I'd like to think that it started in a number of directions. So we have as you know, a very passionate staff. And after work, sometimes they go across the street to the quiz nights at one of the restaurants. Mm-hmm. And so they do quite well too. So they were feeling quite confident about doing this. But of course, all of us on staff were disqualified. We couldn't be on the teams, which was a bit of a relief to some of us, and also to Nat Philbrick.
You'd have to prove that you deserve to be on the staff.
Exactly. Yeah. Even Nat said it as the moderator. Nat Philbrick moderated, and he even said, I'm very glad to be the moderator rather than sitting at one of the tables. So anyway, that happened. And also, when I lived in New Zealand for 12 years, I couldn't help but take note of the popularity of quizzes at pubs, and how people just are almost magnetically pulled to pubs for these quiz nights. So we thought, why not make it? We want to make history as relevant as possible. We want the museum to be a community living room, a place where people feel really comfortable coming in and doing things that oftentimes don't seem to be traditional museum activities. And quiz night fit the bill. Mm-hmm. But we also needed to stick to our mission, which is to preserve and interpret Nantucket history. So what we did, we sent out word, and we got about 2 weeks to go, we had 3 teams. And then I think the buzz started happening, and that's when it grew from 3 to 13, and also a couple of other teams at the last minute I think were showing an interest but weren't going to be in town. So on the night, and it was the first time we had tried this, on the night we went at it. Each team was asked questions, and the winning team of the 2 or 3 that were up in front of the 279 people, the winning team stayed on for the next round. It took 2 hours. It wasn't too long, but it wasn't too short either. And the more the questions were answered, the harder they got. And we had 3 judges there to arbitrate, to make sure that the questions were acceptable. One of my favorite questions was, what is the largest toothed whale in the sea? And we put the questions up on the screen in Gosnell Hall, right?
Okay.
And I think it was Bob Felch, who's got such a wit, said, he said, "Could you move that whale so I can read the question?" Which I thought was, but there was that kind of levity that prevailed on the night, and it was so much fun, so much fun. And then at the very end, you know, we're not for profit. We're not by any means swimming in money, but we have a lot of good ideas, and this was one of them, I think, a tribute to our staff. But so what we had as a prize, as Gino knows, because he thankfully was filming it on the night, was a little stuffed sperm whale. And we put a mortar board on the top of it with a little plastic trophy. And in the final round, when the final 3 teams came up to fight it out, Nat, who was so funny, said, remember holding up the whale. He said, remember, this is what you've come for. in effect, it was about a $3.99 value. But it was great, and already we're receiving a lot of questions about when is it going to be offered again, and also I've perceived a couple of mild threats if we don't do it. But it's going to be a tradition.
Now, who devised the questions?
Okay, now Peggy Godwin, behind every great idea and that makes it to public programming, is a passionate champion, and Peggy Godwin, our interpretive corps, was the champion behind this. She had the idea that hit the ground. She put together all of the questions, working with our education staff. We had them vetted internally, so we weren't about to screw up any of the answers. And Peggy did it. She and I congratulate her on that. And the more programs we can do that spurred up from that kind of enthusiasm, the better, I think.
Now, how did you pick the night?
Yeah, I haven't got a clue. We just picked the night that we were free.
Well, generally, you pick a night and you find out there's 5 other things that you're competing with.
Oh, there was one other thing happening in town, but we picked the night because it was Saturday, we were free. And also, the other thing, Whitey, is that Nantucket's so quiet at this time of the year. We thought, let's try this out. Maybe we'll have a good sampling of people to try it out with, and if it fails, it might not be too noticeable. But if it's I didn't know there were that many people on Nantucket.
Yeah, if it's successful, you don't have any room to grow.
Well, that's a question. But I would very much like to continue doing it in the Whaling Museum, because we really do see the Gosnell Hall as a living room.
Did you charge for this?
No, it was free. We charged the teams $15 a person.
Okay.
So that might be the thing that changes next year, just to prepare the audience that's caring to listen to this interview.
Seating or something like that.
Yeah, we might have to charge a little bit, but I'd love to keep it in the Gosnell Hall.
That's a good idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Because fact is, it's a lot of staff time, and I haven't figured out exactly what we made or lost on the other night, but we probably just broke even. And I think being a not-for-profit, it would be nice to make a little bit of money from it, but not so much that it chases people away, but enough that people who come in who aren't members, and by the way, a fair number of people who are on those teams, I noticed, are not members. And as we speak, they're getting letters from me asking them to get more involved. But as an encouragement for membership, we're if it's $5 or something to get in, you can become a member for not a lot more if you're not. So we want to use it as an incentive.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Tell me, is there some other plans that you have from the NHA that we should hear about this?
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
We have 2 big projects coming up.
Okay.
Anybody who has time and the interest in this should walk by Greater Light on Howard Lane near the Civil War Monument. Twig Perkins, we're very pleased to have hired local contractors to work on Greater Light. And Twig Perkins and his crew are doing an extraordinary job. They're very neat, they're very swift, and they'll have by mid-June Greater Light in a state that will be able to offer it as a work-in-progress walkthrough site.
Okay.
Now this, of course, was the home of Hannah and Gertrude Monahan. They bought it it was a cattle barn when they bought it in 1929, and then they made it into an artist salon and lived there painting, acting, holding tea parties. It had a real atmosphere about it. What we like about Greater Light is that it opens the doorway onto a whole era about Nantucket's history that's present in our past, almost so present you can touch it. It has, it's about the art colony and resort era when Nantucket reawakens to another era and another healthier economy than it had before. And so what we're going to be doing is restoring that and taking a few rooms and putting them back exactly the way the Monahans had it, using the Great Hall for, remember I've said the museum is a living room. This would be more like a community parlor for more intimate recitals, perhaps armchair theater, any number of things that both are intimate and keep are not so high profile that the neighbors are disturbed. So, but it will be, the best part is that it will be cared for. And Greater Light will be open as a work in progress in June, and in 2011 it will be fully open, completed, and interpreted.
Will people be dressed up in old period costumes and
No, but I think
they used to be.
I think they used to be there, but I have to say that while there won't be people dressed in period costumes there, I think we're going to do it in a way that you almost feel the presence of Gertrude and Hannah Monahan. That's one of our projects. The other project that's happening in 2011 is that we've contracted Rick Burns, the famed documentary film producer, to do a 20-minute gateway film on the history of Nantucket. That once you see it, you'll be talking to other people who visit the island and saying, "You've got to see this." In 20 minutes, you can understand affectively. It's no didactic piece. It's an affective piece about Nantucket that just helps you get it. That helps you understand that you're not standing on just some disconnected sandbar, but that it is the real corner of the world, like Melville called it in Moby Dick, and it is the beginning of a global economy for America, which leads me to say that the other thing that Rick Burns is working on, that actually will come out in May, and this is how we got in touch with him in the first place, is doing a 2-hour documentary on the history of American whaling.
Oh boy!
And I've seen snippets of this, and this is a very powerful piece that will frame the history of American whaling around the voyage of the Essex as a symbol of the search for a resource that just isn't renewable. And Rick's piece is powerful, and it will be transformative, and that comes out in May. His gateway film for us will be 2011 when we open Greater Light full time.
So you're going to focus on the Essex.
Well, he is. Rick chose the Essex mainly because he read Nat's In the Heart of the Sea.
Okay.
Which, when you read it, you just, as you know, can't stop thinking about it. And we do the Essex Gam every day at the Whaling Museum. So Rick read that, and then he went back to Moby Dick, read Moby Dick, and then he was pulled magnetically to Nantucket like the Monahans were. He had to come here, see the real place. And from that grew the idea to do a 2-hour documentary on American whaling. It will be brilliant.
I can't help but say that my grandfather's grandfather was master of the Essex.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Daniel Russell, but he got off before the last trip.
Now, do we have his ladle? I think we have his ladle.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. My cousin gave it. Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Boy, that
grandfather's grandfather. It's amazing. You can go back.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing. You can you shake the hands of people who shook the hands who lived in that time, and that's how close it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Nantucket's a great place, because it kind of shivers with history. You have a real sense. Alfie Sanford, a good friend of mine, said one night in the middle of the winter when we were sitting in front of his fire, I said, "You know, I love this place in the middle of the winter. It's so quiet. I love it in the summer too." But he said, "I love it here too because it's alive when it seems dead in the winter."
It's a wonderful test tube as far as the country is concerned. Everything that goes on in the country happens here.
Exactly.
As it did back in the whaling days.
Exactly. Yeah. And as you've done with WPI and the windmill program too. And I see it as that too, a kind of, and Nat Philbrick does too, a kind of microcosm of America. Yeah. And so does Rick. And I think people, a lot of people who view this film will see the touchstone quality of an island like Nantucket.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your being here.
My pleasure.
And I hope we can have you back on
the program. I'd love to come back,
periodically to keep us up to date with the history.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Whitey.
Thank you very much, Bill. Right.
It seems like 100 years since I reached out to dry.